It's right to say it's such a lovely evening, and we're kind of inside, which is a pity because there's a bit of what I'm going to talk about is about nature, and it's about our environment and how much we can enjoy what we do, being outside and not being stuck in. And so, in a way, I apologise for bringing you inside, but I hope that we'll. In some way learn something that over the coming months, that there might be something that you can bring with you. And I suppose nature and environment are such an important part of us. We're from it all, and we're part of it. And I think really our mental health has got something to do with that connection. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. I suppose as an overview, these are the kind of ideas I want to talk about. In a way, it won't always flow, and something won't move to the next bit, because it's going to be a kind of in a way, a journey. Not only my journey, I suppose, because being important to say, I'm a mental health nurse, and I think back, it's been a while since I started. It's over 20 something years, and I kind of don't, looking back over all those years, I think about what it is that I learned, what was the thing that has got me to this stage, and most of it has been about the people I've met. And the people I've met are not necessarily the staff I've worked with, the great nursing colleagues I've worked with, and doctors and so many different disciplines, but the patients I've met and their families, and learning about resilience from them, learning so much about them being in terrible, difficult situations and yet recovering. Recovery is a big part of mental health practice. It's almost like it's a new word that has come in, but it's always been a part of what we wanted to do. We wanted to make sure people recovered, and recovered didn't necessarily just mean being cured, but it meant being able to live a fruitful life. So these are the kind of titles we'll look at tonight, and let's just see where that goes, if that's okay. What I believe this will be available for you to see again, which I can't imagine you'd want to see me again, but I would get a sense that maybe there might be something else that will come out, and not necessarily just what is said, but also maybe what we're beginning to think of as I'm speaking. There's a short video I want to show you in the middle of it. I hope you're going to be able to see it, but I believe it will be on the website. And if it's not too clear this evening, please go to watch it again, because I found it quite recently, and I found it very very enriching. Okay, so. In the past, I did a little bit of teaching, and you often think about definitions when you're teaching. And I thought we better get a definition of what mental health is, because it's kind of difficult to say what is what is this idea of mental health that we're trying to all get to, or get people to, or even what is illness, and what are we trying to get people recovering from. So as you see that in front of you, it's defined as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. So that's the definition of what mental health is from the World Health Organization. Earlier, they would have said what health is, and it's a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So I want to get this idea again, of course. It's not just about everything gone and everything being away from you, and all the things are cured. It's a little bit more than that, okay? And I think that as myself, I am just another person. I may well be working in mental health, but I'm somebody who will struggle with mental health difficulties often. I will have my lows and my highs, and I will have times when I feel like I can't go on really in ways. I feel depressed, I feel sad, just like everybody does. I have ways of coping, and as I said, I've learned some things over the years, and I want to just share a few of those kind of, I suppose, little tricks, I suppose. And these are the things that can help us with that, building our resilience, so that when times get tough, there is a way of getting over that. When I look back, this is a very old photo of me and my dad. I was very small then, obviously, so it's a nice little picture. It's one I keep very close, because first of all, it obviously means an awful lot to me, because it's my dad and he's no longer with us anymore. But he was an extremely kind man, and he taught me a lot about kindness. I was away when he passed away, and there was when I came back and I came home, And my mother had said that even in his last few hours, he wanted to make sure everybody was okay. And there was this sense of kindness about him. And he didn't know anything about mindfulness. Like his generation, and maybe we're here in different generations as well. Mindfulness is something that is a word and something that we do. It's something that we've done for generations as well. But he didn't know about that. He didn't have any psychology training as such, but he was just kind. And by making kind of small, significant changes to your life, you can achieve a healthier and happier mind. And you can achieve what might be called mental health. There's an overarching truth in the world, and it says that all people, it actually says all men are born equal, but I wouldn't dare say that anymore. I would say that all people are born equal. Me too, is not what it is there. Thinking about that in another way, though, genetically, there are differences. And we're obviously all made up of different genes that predispose us to certain characteristics which are different to others. And with mental health, for instance, there are some people who are genetically more inclined to be happier than others. And it's a kind of a fact. And there's a study that had been done in Harvard, and they'd done a lot of studies around with twins and samples of the population. And basically, the study posited that about 40% of our genetic upbringing is kind of there already. It's static, and we can't really do an awful lot about it. So we're predisposed in a way to have a certain amount of happiness. And you probably all know happy people, generally people who seem to be kind of happy all the time, and ones who are probably less so. And that's that little bit that we can't really do an awful lot about. So we're kind of stuck with that. And that kind of sounds bad, I know, in a way, but it's only 40%. And there's still an awful lot of other percentage, which I'm going to get to in a minute. And I'm not too sure if there's any Americans in the audience. I don't know. Hopefully that means there isn't. Good. But Americans are they're an interesting, I actually love Americans. I think they're great. They're such a positive group of, and a kind of a positive nation. There's a fundamental positivity about that nation, and it always kind of astounds me a lot. Notwithstanding their president maybe at the moment, but we can leave him aside, I suppose. But apart from that, Americans seem to be more positive and generally kind of happier than many others. They even have it written into their constitution, which I think is quite amazing. The life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, which when you consider it actually in the constitution of a country, it wants people to be pursuing happiness, pursuing health, pursuing mental health really. And like, it's how great that can be for any country. Our own constitution, I don't think does that. I have a copy of the constitution and I tried to read it and I lasted about 2 pages because it's quite boring really. But, it's just this idea that written something into what defines a whole nation, that the pursuit of happiness is something that would be of interest to people. And a constitution is a roadmap for how a country works. And it's almost that the wish for the entire people is to be happy. So I was kind of saying that there was the 40% of ourselves we can't do much about. And that's kind of a static thing. And then there's another group of studies say that there's about another 10% that we don't do an awful lot about. And that's kind of about our environment, or maybe about the place where we are, or how we are physically. We can make some changes to our physical sense, but generally we can't do an awful lot about that. And that if you're not, or if you are beautiful, or if you are attractive, you're kind of got that, and that's it. And that's okay. Because really that doesn't matter, because it's really about how you feel about yourself, isn't it? It's about whether you feel you're attractive or whether you feel you're beautiful. So it doesn't really matter how you are. So we're up to about 50% now. And the stats and figures there will say that this 50% is up to us. We've got 50% that we can do something about. So that's quite a lot. So that's great news. So that means there's 50% that is fluid, variable. We can move around that a little bit. And I suppose what I want to try and think about is that, and for all of you to consider, is let's try and work on that 50% as much as possible, because we're not stuck with it. And we can do things about that. And there'll be a few little tricks and a few little kind of ideas that I might throw with you tonight and see if there's some practices that you want to use. And these are kind of proven and they're evidence to say these will help your mental health. Charles Darwin is quoted a lot about the survival of the fittest. And I suppose his idea around there was around evolution, wasn't it? About, the idea that the fittest survived. And there was a bit left at the end of that doesn't often get quoted, but it's about this idea about being adaptable, that it's the adaptable people that survive. It's the ones that can continue on. And And I think mental health is about survival, or really just about living that fruitful life that you want. Being able to adapt is the greatest strength we have in combating stress and mental health problems. The ability to adapt and to be able to change is really a cornerstone of building better mental health. So it's all good news. We're dealt a hand of cards. We do what we want with that hand that we were given. Is there a way that we just stick with them? Or we're just going to hold what we were given? You know, like in poker, if anybody knows that, you get your cards, you can give a few back and you can change them if you want. And wouldn't that be the best thing to do rather than just hold what you have? So we'll try and do the best we can with what we have instead of just accepting it for ourselves. So that should move on. So are you really kind to yourself or not? And if you start asking yourself, how much time and energy do you spend brooding over the future, ruminating about the past, and comparing yourself to others, and engaging in what is called negative self-talk? That idea that you're combating yourself all the time. I'm no good at doing enough. I can't do X. I can't do Y. I wish I could be like Y. I wish I could be like X. All that energy and all that time given over to negativity. And wouldn't it be interesting if we could do something about that and change it? And what we're saying is that we can, and there is a lot that we can do. This idea of loving yourself to me is so important, and being kind to yourself. I travel to work here in St. John of God by travelling on the M50 in the mornings, and I come southbound. No, sorry, I come southbound, I go homebound. But going in on southbound is one of those things you hear in the morning on the traffic reports. And sometimes I get caught up in a bit of traffic, and I'm left there. And I'm wondering, like, how am I using this time when everyone around me is stuck in their cars and we're nowhere to go? And I've come up with something short, and I learned it a few years ago, but I've now got it on my dashboard. And it's this little script I have, and it's a kindness script. And it's a daily thing that I use to focus myself on self-kindness. And this is it. It's 3 simple phrases. May I be safe. May I have peace. May I be healthy. 3 simple phrases to start the day. May I be safe. May I have peace. And may I be healthy. I'm bringing attention to the moment where I am. That moment where I am in the car. May I be safe. May I have peace. And may I be healthy. And I do find this very effective for myself. And even if you've time, and if you're in the car or wherever you are that you're stuck, you can expand that kindness then to move from yourself to others. So after repeating the 3 simple phrases, and I begin to imagine somebody that I want to be kind towards. Or it might be 2 people or 3 people. It could be anybody. And that kindness is something that I want to share. So at that moment, you can close your eyes. And if you want to try this now, please do. But again, as you wish. But if you wanted to try it and closing your eyes and thinking of that person who you want to send kindness to, and imagining them there in front of you and repeating that phrase, but changing it a small bit. May you be safe, may you have peace, and may you be healthy. And trying to hold that person with your eyes closed and repeating again, may you be safe, may you have peace, and may you be healthy. And it's quite a powerful thing to do when you really kind of can imagine that person there with you. And all you're doing is thinking about what that's going on. And the idea here is you're focusing on that thing, that moment, that particular phrase. And these phrases, they're from old kind of teachings, I think within Buddhism more so. But it's the idea of centering yourself and bringing yourself in. And you can move it on one bit more. And still with your eyes closed, if you wish, and still holding that person or persons with you, you can mutually share the kindness. And just changing the phrase slightly to, may we be safe, may we have peace, and may we be healthy. And again, I find that quite powerful. And again, it's something that you can repeat a number of times. And in a way, that's meditation. And a lot of people would think, but I don't want to meditate. And I don't want to sit in the lotus position. And I don't want to have incense burning. And all those things that we think of when meditation. But meditation can be as simple as 1 minute. It can be as simple as just repeating a few phrases. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. I should just add, if you're stuck in the M50, don't close your eyes. Because when you're talking to the guards, you can't just say, well, I was practicing a kindness script and just in case. And Kieran said so, yeah, he's on video. But you might learn that as well. That's one of those things. I just realised that when I was saying it, actually. So. Okay. So that's just one small little thing, I suppose, that you can do. So listening to your body is very important, really, for mental health, because there's such a connection, isn't there, between the mind and the body. Although there is a clear distinction, we're often told that there are clear distinctions between what goes on in the mind and the body. But when considering mental health and physical health, the two should never be thought as separate. Poor physical health can lead to increased risk of developing mental health problems, and poor mental health can negatively impact on physical health, leading to an increase of certain conditions. Again, there are a number of studies suggesting strong links between mental health problems and physical illnesses. Depression being associated with high mortality rates from heart disease, some are up to 60-65%. About 49% of risk of death from certain cancers. Schizophrenia, as most people know, one of the kind of major mental health disorders, with very high risks of developing heart disease and respiratory problems. So lifestyle factors do influence your mental health. Exercise, physical activity in any form is a great way to keep you physically healthy and improving your mental health. It's a release of endorphins when we exercise, that feel-good chemical in our brain. It goes a long way to increasing resilience and good mental health. So what's recommended, they say, is 30 minutes a day for 5 days a week. 30 minutes a day of physical activity, not overly strenuous to start, just a gentle walk, a simple stretch. We're not going for marathon training or anything. I have a relative at the moment who's got some medical issues, and just at the weekend even I was helping him exercise. And the exercise was pretty basic stuff, going from a chair to a door, moving a little bit further out and then to a hallway. Walking from the chair to the door to the room at the back, and then we did it twice. Then we rested and then ended up at the end of the day walking out of the room to the full length of the hallway and back again. Simple small steps, simple short progresses, leading up slowly to the recommended 30 minutes a day. And for those of us who might be a bit more active, we would hope, I suppose, that we could be a bit more active and move to 30 minutes a day. And of course that can be increased. Not talking about gym membership just yet, you don't need that. You don't need to put on your lycra suits and jog, 10 kilometres every morning before breakfast, but just simple stuff. Physical activity, though, can be solitary. And throughout just when we're talking this evening, we want to emphasise that another of these key building blocks for mental health is the presence of other people. We're social animals, so anything you do, anything you would try to do with other people or involving other people. Running, jogging, walking, it doesn't have to be solitary. I read last week that in Devon over in the UK, there's a group called Sarah's Runners. And Sarah was somebody who had struggled a long time with mental health issues. And she found that helping helped her recovery. But she wanted and needed that kind of social aspect to her running because she found it quite solitary. And in a way, and this happens to a lot of people with mental health issues, they become quite solitary. So she talked a lot to a health professional, and Sarah then was joined by someone else who was part of the mental health service. And they started jogging together and just doing gentle runnings 3 times a week. They talked about their current state of mind and blending this idea of blending physical and mental health and blending their recovery in a way together. So they were 3 times a week, and now at the moment, and this is going on for about 18 months, she now has 20 runners with her. And she's recently just been put forward for an award for one of the mental health charities for really pushing this idea of physical health assisting with your mental health recovery. And it's great to listen to. It's a podcast that is called All in the Mind. It's from BBC Radio 4. But it's just very interesting that they tell you these short stories about what is going on and what's possible. So leading an active life can improve feelings of self-worth, and it can foster self-confidence. It can assist you in setting goals for yourself. And exercise has been seen to decrease stress, boost energy, improve sleep, give a sense of achievement, give you a focus, and also lets you have fun. And it also actually does improve your social life. So you can get started and make room for physical activity. You can choose, but the important thing is choosing the right activity for you. I would say, and this is coming from me, maybe not from others, but don't join a gym. Don't cycle a bike that is nailed to the floor. There's so much out there to see. Why would you run or walk on a treadmill when we live in Ireland and there's so much beautiful nature to see around us? And also, why swim in a swimming pool? We're an island, we've got the sea beside us, we're filled with rivers and lakes. The sea is just it's the best swimming pool that I've ever known. And I was in Galway recently and I saw an advert for a group, and they're a group of women who are over 65. I'm not going to say older. They are over 65 years of age. And every morning in Salt Hill, which is a beautiful place to swim, every morning they go out, and they're called the Happy Splashers. And their motive, or their idea is feel the fear and dive in. And every morning they're there at 8 o'clock, gathered together, and they're always encouraging others to come in with them. And it's a wonderful thing to see. I really love to see. Whenever I get a chance, I'll go down to the shore. Sometimes I'll get in, and I'm being inspired by watching other people who do, no matter what time of the day or time of the year. The sea is a very cleansing place for me. And in many religions, you know, the sea has been used as that idea of initiation, isn't it, into the religion. I'm thinking of John the Baptist, maybe in Sea of Galilee, that idea of that baptism idea. And I think that the Hindu religion as well, and the Ganges would use river and water. So it's quite a kind of a strong image for me as well. I have a short video that I want you to watch as well, if that's okay with you. It's called Tonic of the Sea. It's about a lady who was slowly coming out of a lot of mental health issues that she had, and she found solace really in the sea and in the waves. It's a lovely video, and I hope you can all see and hear it. But yet again, if you can't, I think it will be available for after. So if you just give me 1 minute, I'll get this.
I was, desperate to find my way back to me, and I couldn't. Didn't matter what I did, I just couldn't find it. I think that was part of it, that getting poorly, either, depression or, the anxiety, all of it, the panic, the sleep loss, it took completely away my confidence in life. And the sea brought it back. I was kind of going through life doing what we all normally do, working very long hours, looking after family members, trying to keep, everybody happy, trying to go to everything that everybody was inviting me to. Thinking you're doing all of the right things in being extremely busy, but all of a sudden became really, really tired, really exhausted, horrific fatigue, and just could no longer carry on. It was almost like my poor brain and body just crashed through severe exhaustion. And through that, I pretty much had a nervous breakdown, which was, in a way, a breakdown of my nerves, and got something called myoclonic jerking, which is where my muscles went into kind of a nervous state. So whilst I was trying to rest at night time, my muscles would keep jumping. And the only kind of reason or cause that the neurologist could come up with was that I'd completely exhausted my body. There was points at night, because I wouldn't sleep for entire nights, because my body was doing something on its own that I had no control over, and it was petrifying. I was petrified. I would be lying in bed all night long, not being able to sleep, and obviously through severe exhaustion as well. You're very emotional because I was so tired. So I would often just lay awake and cry. It was one of the loneliest times I feel that I've had in my life so far. So I'd find myself kind of out very early morning with my camera, because I really like taking sunrise photos. And I'd go down to Battery Rocks and just sit and wait for the sunrise. And so that's where I met some of the Battery Rock swimmers, and I met Mike. And the swimmers kind of found me really and invited me to start swimming with them.
I try and go every day, whatever the weather. In fact, sometimes the weather is part of the whole experience. And sometimes you just meet people that you feel you've known for all your lives. And I love swimming with Katie because it's a very calming influence to have one other person swimming at the same speed and with the same style.
Mike kind of came along at the right time, really. And I look back now and think how amazing, in the sense of that it was meant to be, which you can only ever link up the dots, can't you, when you look back. Mike's an ex-lifeguard, so obviously with some of my fears, I felt really safe swimming next to him. And he was very good at kind of sneakily saying, I'll just be here and you swim off there. And before I knew it, I'd kind of done bits on my own. You get in, it's freezing cold, you get this real rush of that you're doing something that's completely out of the ordinary. But it really kind of energises you, and it's something that makes you feel really proud of yourself, because you feel like you're doing something that's quite brave. And I think what had happened with me, because I'd got poorly, was all my confidence was completely knocked out of me. It made me feel brave again, and gave me a tiny little bit every morning of me back. That I'd get out and think, I can swim in the sea, so there's a part of me still there. And, my son hasn't lost his mum, and I haven't lost me. And slowly that little bit of bravery, and it was a really long time, but it kept creeping back in, that I'd walk away and feel a little bit like I had a tiny little bit of strength and a tiny bit of capability left.
It is that thing about, you get lots of knocks in life and you always think, is it me? Everybody else is cleverer than me. Why is this happening? But if you've done something that is exceptional, and whenever you say to people, we go swimming before the sun rises in the sea, in the wild sea, suddenly their perception of you changes a little bit and they think, I couldn't do that. So that, in building up a sense of self-worth and achievement, is massively important. And it's beautiful to be involved in that. I know that sounds a bit airy-fairy, but it is. I'm witnessing what's going on with her on a regular basis.
The sea was something that kind of offered me its own support, in a way that I felt looked after by it and supported by it, because I could just get in and let myself kind of be, like I said earlier, be part of something that's bigger than me. There's something just incredible about being out in the sea at dawn, kind of out in the middle of the bay, and sometimes we stop, Mike and I, and we just kind of tread water and float there, and you're just looking at the sunrise, and it just feels like it's just you and the sea and the sun. It doesn't feel like anything else matters. Work, running homes, food shopping, cooking, we all do it. We all get involved and het up in all of those things, all of those have-tos and all of that busy. But being in the sea and being in the calm of the morning kind of reminds you that we're just part of the natural earth. And if we don't spend enough time doing that, our poor bodies and minds completely get overloaded and can't cope. It's brought me back to complete health. I feel completely well again, completely me again, which was lovely, because I really never thought I'd get back to there. And the swimming, I just feel, is something that has been played a huge role in that. The sea has played a huge role in that for me. And every time I look at it, I feel like it's saying, come on, you've got to come back in. Because if I don't go for a couple of days, I think actually I'm not looking after myself, and I'm not doing that thing that helps to keep me well.
So again, it's that idea of the story that people tell, and what are the things that help, and different things help many different people, and I would always, of course, understand that, but I just, again, it's a personal opinion, and I suppose I just wanted to use that video as well to show other people. But I think there's something quite, enriching about that kind of living with the sea, and we are an island nation, and that. So I better stop talking about the sea because I'll go on about an awful lot. So apologies. So just another thing, I suppose, with physical health, conscious of time, that good nutrition, of course, is very important and vital to influencing how we feel. What we all know, what we all hear about, healthy mixes of proteins, essential fats, complex carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals, and water, of course, are all needed. Strong bodies of evidence linking diet and mental health, and it's growing as an evidence base. Dietitians are now becoming much closer, and they're working with primary mental health teams more than they ever did. This notion that people with who express difficulties with mental health, they found were tending to eat less vegetables. It sounds like a bit of a crude kind of a study, but that this was work done in Portsmouth, and they felt that there must be some kind of links between it. The evidence again is a little bit sketchy, but it's growing all the time. Smoking is never a good idea, everyone knows. I used to be a smoker, so I can say that, I suppose. But there is this idea that we always had about smoking helping us to relax, and that you can reduce your anxiety very quickly by having a cigarette. I would never go down on people with smoking, but I suppose that the evidence around nicotine is that it does work on your brain. It actually works with dopamine and begins to release small amounts of dopamine, which make you get that immediate kind of feeling better. But it also inhibits the production, so you always need more nicotine. And really, I suppose you're always struggling to get that back again. Get that little bit of stress release. So perhaps it might not be the most productive way of trying to release tension. I just mentioned earlier this idea of doing things with people all the time and being socially active, and this idea of being social. Being social helps your mental health. Being solitary can be detrimental to your mental health. I believe that the act of social integration is vitally important to achieving a mentally healthy life. The University of Toronto did a very longitudinal study finding that people who were seen to be socially involved with others lived longer and had fewer physical health complaints than those who led more solitary lives. This was just a study of a smaller group of people, but we can begin to think about maybe these when we reflect on our own lives, I suppose. You don't have to get married, you don't have to have huge amounts of circle of friends, but as long as you have connections. They even found as well that social connectedness was boosting your immune system, so it was actually helping to protect you against physical illness. So spending time with others is important. Lingering over that cup of coffee with your friend. Calling over to a friend instead of sending a text. And if you can't physically be present, maybe making a phone call. Enjoying activities with other people. Sometimes even sharing a movie with somebody so you can speak about it afterwards. I was in my local park recently, and it was a Saturday morning, and there was the park runs were on, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of. And what really struck me, a few things struck me. One, I sat down on the bench and watched everybody exercising, which I thought was a good way of dealing with it. That's how I felt at the time. But I watched everyone running, and some were walking, and some were walking their dogs. But people were doing it together. It wasn't single people doing it here, there, and everywhere. People were moving together, chatting and talking, So it was a lovely experience actually to watch all that. Altruism is good for your mental health. Altruism, what I mean by altruism is caring about other people and acting in another person's best interest. Offering that seat on the bus, holding the door open for another person. These type of basic altruistic acts that many or most of us perform each day. I believe, though, that people are generally good, and there's a certain goodness about people. And I think our distant ancestors, they had a sense of altruism because it was necessary. It was hard to survive in a harsh world and in a place full of threats without other people. So you kind of had to have everyone around you. So I think that idea of us we're probably a bit genetically predisposed to wanting people around us and being good to other people. And it's that idea about giving something to somebody and getting something back. So I'm going on about studies a lot, but here's another one. The NUI in Galway did a very short little study. I think some of you might have seen this on TV, but I found it quite interesting. So, they gave small amounts of money to 3 different groups of people. And the first group were asked, take that, there was about 3 or 4 of them, take the money with you and go and buy yourself something, which they did. So some of them went and bought themselves lunch, some went and bought an item of clothing, some bought some lottery tickets, and I think there was probably some went off and had a drink or whatever with it. And afterwards they were asked to rate how good that made them felt. Okay. So the second group of people, they were given similar amounts of money again and said, go and use that now and spend it on a charity. Give it to whatever charity you want, whoever you want to, just give that away. So they went and did that. And again, they were asked to rate how well did they feel after that. And then the third group of people, they were given amounts of money again. And they were asked to do one particular thing, though. They were said, go and buy something for someone else. And make sure that person you buy it for, you're going to see, so you can give it to them. And they said, it'd be a friend, a relative, whoever, or even if it's a stranger, just do it. So you probably see what I'm getting at. But the answer was the people who were the happiest were the ones who bought something for somebody. But then it was that bit of giving it to the person and seeing that receipt of kindness. Although the people who bought something for themselves felt happy, they didn't rate themselves as high. The ones who gave to charity felt quite happy as well, but again, not rating as high as that group of people. So it was a kind of an interesting study really around that idea of altruism. Again, these were kind of small gifts, small ideas, and altruism, I suppose, links as well with volunteerism. That idea that, you can, in a way, in a way that a stress relief sometimes can be helping other people who are maybe in a worse position than you are. And you've got a sense of, well, things aren't as bad for me, but I can try and help them out a bit. I had an experience recently of being in Stewart's Hospital, which somebody might know in Palmerstown, and there was a gala on for the Special Olympics, and a group of moderate to severe, I won't say all children because some of them were adults, with learning difficulties, and they were in the heats for swimming, for the swimming gala for the Olympics. And it was just a really incredible experience watching this group of people. And there was just one small thing they did. Before every single race, they all shook hands with each other. Everybody went along and shook hands. And you don't see that really in sport anymore. You see it in football, but it's a bit kind of limp. It's a bit just do it for the sake. But there was a real sense of, wishing each other luck. And then going out and achieving for yourself. And that's what it was, really. It was just that bit of overcoming your own difficulties just to achieve. And it didn't really matter who won. And that was the most incredible thing about it. Nobody cheered and jumped up and down. They just carried on as it was, and again congratulated each other. So it was a really nice thing to see. I think I'm okay. This is a book that everyone's written, I think, and probably will continue to write. It's come. I found this picture and it reminded me. Someone said to me about this idea of how many people were in the shower with you when you were talking to them, because you're constantly arguing with them all the time, But I'm sure you recognise it, and how many discussions you've had in the shower, how many people you've brought in metaphorically with you. This recurring thing in your thoughts in your mind, the recurring thought whirling around your head, replaying old conversations or new arguments. You may know, but we'll just repeat again what is happening to the body when stress comes. If you want to experience stress, agree to do a talk in St. John of God Hospital. It's always a good way. The human body responds to events that provoke stress, these stressors, okay? And then activating the nervous system, again, that mind-body relationship. Specific hormones are released. The hypothalamus, that bit in the brain, it's kind of, I think, sits right underneath the brain. It signals the adrenal gland to produce more adrenaline and cortisol and releases them into the bloodstream. Heart rate rises, breathing heightens, blood pressure increases, your metabolism goes into overdrive, and you're ready and prepared now to handle upcoming pressure. You're prepared so that you should be prepared, because the body is reacting to what a threat might be. And what we've already said is we're quite genetically differently made up, and different as individuals. So what causes me stress will not cause other people stress. Standing in front of you may cause me more stress than somebody else who would stand here. Engaging in a social event, going into, say, an evening social event where you don't know people can be a very stress-inducing kind of event for a lot of people. And maybe even just getting up out of bed and going outside the door can be very stressful for some. There are psychological effects of stress, the sadness and depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, sometimes hostility, and sometimes irritability. And those physical effects, there's some work that was done about the idea of people having back pain or shoulder pain, is the feelings of carrying the world on their shoulders, headaches, they were thinking too much, that GI disturbance. It's like that question, where do you feel the stress? And usually it's here, isn't it? That kind of almost a kind of irritable feeling within your stomach. There's insomnia as well. Your digestive system is a bit out of whack. Heart rate increases, and you may, as we said, continue to smoke because it might make you feel that little bit better at the beginning. In stress, relationships can be strained, or they can even be a source of stress. But talking to someone can always help. And all of what we said before about diet and exercise help relieve the stress and build better mental health. And combating stress can also be achieved through setting goals. Your goals being SMART, S for specific, M for measurable, A for achievable, O for relevant, and time for time specific. And that SMART idea, it's in the business world as well as in the health world, but it's a very important one, I think. So meet a friend soon. Keep that diary. Keep a diary about how you're feeling. And walk maybe one day a week, just in order to kind of combat that stress if that's what you're experiencing. Got to mindfulness eventually, and I thought, and I'm sorry, I'm going on a little bit late. What I believe from mindfulness, and Dr. Blennerhassett said at the beginning, it can be quite complex. You go to any bookshop now, and you will find books and books and books on mindfulness. You'll find colouring books. There's a lot of talk about what this is. And to me, this is what it is. It's deliberately returning your attention with acceptance. It's right here, it's right now. This is what is important. This is what's happening at the moment. It's about this moment, your breath, what you see, your posture, and your physical feelings. Acceptance is being aware of your experience without commenting on it, without analysing it, without criticising it. It's not surrender, it's not going into a trance. It's about really being in the experience. I watched on TV over Christmas that singer Adele, and she was singing one of her songs in a concert last year in the Albert Hall, and a lot of people were videoing it on their phones, and she stopped the concert, and she just asked everybody, "Why are you videoing me?" And somebody shouted up and said, "Is to watch it later." And she said, "But I'm here now. Enjoy it now. Enjoy me and enjoy the experience, and bring that experience with you. You don't need to video it to watch it and to re-experience it." So to me, that's what mindfulness is really about. It's here and now and what's happening. And maybe it might be, it might be a thing where mindfulness is something that should be experienced more than rather being talked about. So I'd encourage any of you, really, mindfulness can be a very personal experience to start with, but there are many groups and there are many facilities that put together mindfulness sessions, and it can be a thing that you can begin yourself. So that idea in the car and that kindness script, that's some of mindfulness, and purely just even simple body scanning. I'm going to finish now in a moment, but that idea of breaking the routine is something that I've done. And this might be simple, but go home tonight and just sit in a different chair. Don't sit in the same chair that you usually sit in. Because we often do that. I think a lot of us have the armchair at home, don't we? Or we have that place where we sit and we tend to stay in that same position. So just do it differently. Do things a little bit differently. When you're brushing your teeth tomorrow morning or tonight before you go to bed, spend a little bit of time just thinking about what you're doing. Sense it on your teeth. Sense the water. Splash water on your face. And it's about these sensations, because a lot of these are going by all the time and we forget about them. But just here and now and in the middle of it is very... it can be quite... revolutionary in a way, so it's again, change your perspectives a little bit. Getting help will be important at some stages, and I know I was introduced as working here with admissions and referrals, but it's very important to know that the mental health services within the whole country are available. They are there for everyone, and I know there's a lot of bad news about mental health service, but encouraging all the time for people to use their primary mental health service, their GP, and their GP will help them and move them on to the next places. So if you are in need yourself, or if you know people who are, please always encourage them to get help. What I would never want to hear is people saying there isn't anything available, because it is there. And remembering again that mental health is not something that we can always see, or mental illness I should say. Mental illness is something that can just be like that person. It won't be there right in front of you. And just a couple of things. Keeping it simple to me is the most important thing. And keeping it simple might be like writing a journal of my feelings every now and again, and being thankful every night. And Maureen Gaffney, who wrote that book Flourishing as well, and she talked about this idea of the being grateful to yourself and writing down 3 things every night on a sheet of paper that you're thankful for. I am thankful for the bed. I'm thankful for the pillow that I put my head on. I am thankful for there's a window I can look out and see the sky. And waking up in the morning, I'm thankful my eyes have vision and I can see around me. Very simple things. And what's interesting, if you do 3 every day, Imagine what you'll be after 10 days. You'll have 30 things to be thankful for. And my multiplication isn't very good, but if you multiply 3 by, you know what I mean. But you keep on gathering and gathering a very long list all the time, because there's so much to be grateful for as well. And one of the things she talked about was, if there's a negative in your life, you need 3 positives to combat it. So store up as much as you can. Store up as much of these things that you're grateful for, because that's the store you'll go to when you need it. If that idea as well about the script, and it doesn't matter if you can't remember it or if you haven't got something to write down, there's a thing called the 5-finger exercise, just counting 5 things you're thankful for. And they're on your fingers, and they're always there with you all day. And increase that to 10 if you need to as well, of course. So thanks very much for listening, and I'll leave you now. But I'm sorry I went over time a little bit. So thank you.
Kieran, would you like to kick off with a few questions there?
I'm going to go with a very simple one, because I was asked, if you can't get down to the sea, can you just have a cold shower? And I would say yes. No, so, but I suppose just to think about a little bit about that is that I know I went on a lot about the sea, and I suppose I shouldn't really kind of, because it's more personal opinion stuff, but I see a lot in water, and I get that idea of that cleansing nature as well. But I think it's really thinking about any activities that you enjoy, and the things that there is somebody, I think it was some French philosopher once said that the meaning of life is finding the thing you enjoy doing and just do it as much as possible. So maybe that's what it is about, finding that one thing for yourself.
I like that, Kieran. I'm reminded there your enthusiasm for bathing in the sea, something that there's a lot of focus on too in recent times, this idea of forest bathing. It's, of course, the term is coming from Japan, but it's essentially talking about having walks in nature in green settings and that. And again, it's supposed to help regulate our general system. So on to another question. Maybe I'll take a question here. And the question is, can mild depression, anxiety be treated without drugs? I think it says for someone with irritable bowel syndrome. That is, and then they say in terms of what they're thinking of in terms of treatments, talking therapy, mindfulness, healthy eating, etc. Well, the answer to that is, I think the important thing here is to note that the mild depression and anxiety, and the evidence is very good. That approaches such as talk therapy, and as there seems to be the cognitive therapy, looking at our thought patterns, and there's a particularly good evidence base in that regard. But I think talking to a therapist, if we're experiencing mild degrees of anxiety and depression, can certainly be helpful, and medication does not necessarily need to be involved. And I think that linked with approaches such as Kieran is advocating, such as mindfulness, physical exercise, and indeed a healthy diet, can all help at the milder end of anxiety and depression. And particularly in respect of mindfulness, there's quite good evidence that the regular practice of mindfulness is for a person who's had a couple of episodes of depression. I suppose in saying that they're already moving into maybe a more difficult category. But in actual fact, the regular practice of mindfulness has been shown to decrease the length of time to a further episode of depression, or for the episode it seems to be a bit milder, or people can cope with it better. So yes, there is certainly evidence there in that regard. Over to you, Kieran.
Just on that a little bit, I suppose over the years I would have come across many people who just felt unable to engage in a lot of psychological therapy and probably needed that little bit of extra help. So sometimes there was an opportunity.
Just if you
sorry, is that working? Is that better?
Yeah, if you bring the microphone a bit closer to you.
So just again, that idea that maybe sometimes medication has a role as well, sometimes for helping people engage. That's just on that one. Can I go with this other one?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just found this that it's asking, does evidence suggest that coping skills diminish as we get older? And if so, what can one do to combat that? I think that from personal experience, I would say, first of all, I think I would have watched my mother's coping skills diminish a little bit, because a lot of her social networks begin to diminish a little, and unfortunately, as people get older, some people pass on, and maybe people move away. But there is absolutely nothing to suggest that just because somebody is older, that they can't engage in any kind of psychosocial interventions and things that they do themselves. So such as that idea, like I was talking about the Happy Splashers, they're all an older group of women. There are people I know locally who swim down in the 40 foot who would not be of a young age. So I don't believe that age is in any way a restriction. I suppose when people become older, maybe it tends to take a little bit, sometimes that little bit longer to get involved in things. But certainly resilience, and the resilience you build up during your life, is that storehouse you can go back to all the time and pull back from. Yeah.
Thanks, Kieran. On that, I'm struck by, it's not so much a question here, but it's the person is referring to a current book called Lost Connections, which has come out recently. I can't quite think of the author. I think it's Jonathan Harry. Thank you very much for that. But it's been quite well reviewed. I saw, in actual fact, the Alistair Campbell, who many of you will recall was press secretary for Tony Blair, and who himself has suffered with depression, being quite keen on it. Elton John is another fan, and various people have said they liked it very much. But it seems to, reading about it, there is an important aspect to it again that links in with what Kieran is saying. It's about the whole importance of involvement in social groups. Something in the book too that I think a lot of emphasis is put on here, as the writer here notes, is the importance of having something meaningful in your life in respect of work or your employment or study, something that you have a sense of control over. And I know from just reading about, in terms of the reviews on that book, they were talking about examples of projects where people have set up small businesses and they seem to have done much better in themselves. So that kind of thing, I think, going back to what Kieran says, trying to finding certainly connections, finding meaning in our lives. And the author in this case was critical of, I think, his experience of being on a lot of medications over the years, but not finding for him that it actually had helped him to a great deal. So that's I think an interesting, Jonathan Harry, I think seems to be an interesting writer. Back to you, Kieran.
I'll just will I do this one more one?
Yeah.
So, can you hear me all right? Sorry, I can't hear myself. You see.
Yeah.
Is there evidence to say that building mental health can prevent mental health issues, like as a preventative method? And I think it's, in a way, that's what we're really trying to get across tonight, is the idea that true life and doing these things will assist you and assist anybody to prevent possible what was said on the video of breakdown or prevent crisis. I think that trying to follow through on those things that make you feel better. There's a program running in the Hospital of Wellness and Recovery, and one of the things in Wellness and Recovery in that program is the idea of the toolbox, and you create a wellness toolbox, and in that toolbox you stick in all those things that help you to get through bad times, and that could be swimming in the sea, or that could be going for a walk, or it could be meeting a friend of yours, or whatever it is. And it can be like a list of things, and it literally opening up the box, putting your hand in and taking out that thing that helps you. And Wellness and Recovery is a very successful intervention, and I believe it is running in the hospital and does at different times, and it's actually like a course that people do, So I think that there certainly are things within mental health treatment that will help prevent breakdown and prevent probably even hospitalisation, I suppose. Yeah.
Thank you. Now here's, I suppose, an area that can be difficult for particularly families at times, and clearly upsetting in respect of this question that's put. How do families become involved when the hospital system does not seem to welcome them? I think firstly I would have to acknowledge that this can be a difficulty at times, or it may be, depending on the setting, be perceived to be a difficulty. Firstly, I would say that as a generalization, that if you have a relative in hospital, that whatever hospital it is, that they should certainly be encouraging families to be involved in their care even at the simple level. When someone comes to the hospital here, we're always interested in hearing from the relatives or friends that come in with them to give background information, and again for the families to be involved during the hospital stay with the consent of the patient. A difficulty that arises at times is that, as you know, we live in an era where there's great emphasis being put on, well, there's always the issue of confidentiality, but I think we're in an era where there's even more emphasis placed on the necessity to be very respectful in regard to this issue. And a very practical difficulty arises at times in that a person coming into hospital, or who's attending perhaps outpatient services or an inpatient, they may specifically not wish families or relatives to be involved, which can be very upsetting for families at times, and indeed it can be difficult for the staff involved. An approach in terms of the hospital here, all we can do in that situation at times is to say to families, well, we're open to hearing your concerns about your family member, but we're actually not in a position to discuss exactly what, say for example, that the concerns they're expressing or what's happening with them during the treatment stay, except to say that we're trying to help them with their difficulties. But it certainly, I think it can be an area of tension at times. On a more positive note, at the hospital, in a number of areas of treatments, there are family education groups and support groups. Outside of a setting like this, I think this will vary in different settings. I think some services are very much aware of the need to involve families and lend support to them. But sadly, as in all settings, in all situations, these things can be a bit variable. The second question, on a lighter note associated with this question, is what do you say to a smoker who will not accept that smoking is harmful? Any tips? Well, I'm not quite sure what to reply in that regard. I think, like anyone who's addicted to something or other, and clearly smoking is an addiction, that really it's only when the person themselves gets to a point where they consider that particular habit is causing more harm to them than good, they're very unlikely to change their behaviour, and all of the sermons that we might give them, and all of the perhaps health literature we might be dropping around the place for them, they're probably not too likely to pay attention to it. All right, I think that's enough on smokers. Kieran, back to you.
I'm out of questions.
Oh, you're out of questions. Yeah. Very, very good. There is one. Clearly, there's someone in the audience who's a little bit taken aback by your finding America as being a beacon in terms of examples of happiness, particularly the person, and I can appreciate the concerns about issues around mental health and all kinds of things out there. But I think perhaps the point you were making is that in terms of I think you were impressed by that kind of sense of the can-do attitude in America, and the kind of extroversion and the kind of positivity that is certainly, I think, a part of the American attitude, whatever about aspects of the society, which I think would be of concern. But I don't think we need to go to America to find some of the issues that are raised here of concern. And the second aspect that this person was concerned with was Maslow, and they were saying Maslow's theory of happiness. I think was it Maslow's theory of self-actualization. And my recollection of this, it used to appear in a lot of books and lectures, is that the idea, of course, that you're not going to be thinking of high-flown ideas and philosophies and all of this unless you have certain basic needs taken care of, and that you go from needing, we all need the kind of food and shelter, and after that then we can go up to varying degrees of, with Maslow, who was this I think psychologist, the idea of further levels of self-actualization, I suppose enlightenment in our lives. And I think I think more so in terms of happiness, that it's often, rather than something, I know you were talking about the pursuit of happiness, but I think it can often be more so a byproduct of maybe particular ways of behaving. Yeah. And in that regard, I was fascinated at the small study that you reported, that going off and doing nice things for other people that will make us feel better than going off and buying something nice for ourselves.
Yeah, that was I found that quite interesting. So that was true. Maureen Gaffney. But I think the Maslow bit was, in a way, it can be around happiness, because it is that idea of building blocks, you know, and making your way up to a kind of a ladder. So
okay, thank you. And a final question from this side here is, do you have any other information sessions on this topic available? A lot of topics were covered in this one area that themselves could be covered in, I think they were suggesting other 1-hour sessions. In that regard, I would draw attention to the fact that every so often during the year, the hospital runs a mindfulness-based stress reduction course over several weeks under the auspices of the occupational therapy department. There are also shorter lectures that are run at times in various areas on topics such as, I know we've had some on improving your sleep, stress reduction, these kinds of topics. They're advertised every so often during the year. So there are other occasions that some of you might find that you might like to come here. But I think with that I'll end this evening's lecture, and I'd like again to thank Kieran for a most stimulating talk. I'd like to thank Miss Emma Balmain, and again particularly Kate McCallion, and everyone else. I know we have other members of staff here who are staying in on the Monday night to help out. So everyone who's been involved in this, thanks very much to you for your wonderful support here tonight, but for throughout this lecture series, and your wonderful participation. I hope that we'll see you back here again next year, and so thank you. Thanks.